Change gear now and talk about melanoma. Now, a cancer charity is warning people to do more to protect themselves from the sun. The number of skin cancers, these are melanoma skin cancer cases in the UK, is rising. There are going to be a record 20,800 cases diagnosed this year, which is up quite significantly, actually, from the numbers in 2020 and 2022. Now, why is that? Is it because we have an ageing population? Is it because actually we're more aware? Is it because we're out in the sun more than we ever have been? Philippa Kay, NHS GP, joins me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you very much indeed. This is really interesting actually, because I assumed when I read it initially this morning, I assumed it would be young people getting melanoma. They're out, they don't know the risk, they're not putting on the SPF, but actually that's not right.
Yes, so of those, we're estimating 20,800 cases of melanoma. 17,000 of those could be preventable, which is hugely important. But the biggest rise, 57% increase in the over 80s, compared to 7% for much younger adults. And we need to think why. So the fact that we're living longer absolutely plays a part here. But we also need to wonder about things like the sun cream and the SPF protection messaging actually being relatively new. And you add in the sort of boom of the package holiday in the 60s and 70s, and people slathering their bodies with olive oil instead of SPF 30 and above, and it's sort of not surprising.
Yeah, well, my mum was told by her father, go out in the sun, and she would go out and blister. I mean, that was common practice in those days. Even when I was growing up, we used to put on sort of factor 2 oil, which I would never do now.
Yeah. And you thought that it was high. That was like,
I did think it was high.
And you couldn't even get SPF 30. But the important thing here is that most of melanoma type of skin cancer, there are other kinds of skin cancer, but most of it can be prevented by good UV protection. And by that, I mean an SPF of 30 or above and a star rating of at least 4 out of 5 stars. So you have the number on the back, isn't it? Front. That's right. You have to turn it around and you'll see the star rating, and that means that you're protected against UVA and UVB. The other thing to say about melanoma is that if it is detected early, it has an over 90% 10-year survival rate because it can be removed. We can cut it out. So it's really important that everybody actually looks at their skin, and the bits of your skin that you can't look at, your back, your bald head, whatever it may be that somebody else looks at. Yeah. And so what are we looking for? And doctors use the ABCDE little abbreviation to help you remember. So A stands for asymmetry. Moles are broadly generally symmetrical. You could fold the two halves together approximately. If it looks like it's become very asymmetrical, that's something to see a doctor about. B stands for border. The border should be sort of really smooth and regular. If it looks like you've got one bit that's trying to grow off in another direction, see your doctor. C stands for colours. 2 or fewer colours in a mole. If you've got more than that, it needs to be checked. D is for diameter. Things under about 6 millimeters tend to be less concerning. And E, which I think is the most important one here, stands for evolving. If you have a mole which is changing, that always needs to be checked.
So changing or bleeding, itching, those sort of things?
Absolutely. So it can be a change in sensation. It can be a change in size, shape, itching, irritated, numb, any of that, get it checked out. Rule of thumb, if you're not sure, get it checked out.
So now, you say get it checked out. Now, we know the pressures on GP surgeries. So where is the first port of call? Is it still the GP?
For this one, it would be the GP surgery, but you have to remember that there are lots of different ways of contacting your GP surgery. And actually, this sometimes is one which would be good for what we would call an e-consultation. There are various different computer systems, and when you go on your practice's website, it will be open for a certain period of time during the morning, and it will say, you write down what your problem is, and it will say, would you like to attach a photo?
Yes.
Now, we don't want anybody to send pictures of genitals, but if it's on somewhere else in the skin, then take a good photo in good light, and that can be helpful. And then when you are then seen, the e-consultation will be triaged. If we need to see you, then we'll call you in. If we don't need to see you, if it can be reassured or if it's an obvious referral, then we will discuss that with you too.
Now, I'm at high risk because I'm fair. Also, I spent far too much time in the sun. I recently paid like £100 to go and have a mole check. What do you make of those services where you basically get into your pants and someone looks at your entire skin and they use some sort of technology to image them?
There are various different ways that you can look at moles, and there's a little device which some GPs have called a dermatoscope, where you can see slightly almost into the skin. It gives a sort of 3D image slightly of a mole into the skin. Not all GPs are able to use that, but that is available. I think that the screening committee in the UK haven't recommended that everybody does that, but that is the screening committee makes decisions based on a number of factors, which also would include cost. I would recommend that everybody does look at their own skin. And you might say, oh, I'm not sure about this one, or this one is 5 millimeters, but it's got no other signs. Take a picture with a ruler next to it so that you can see if it is growing or not. And a mole check is a way of somebody else doing that for you if you can afford to do that.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Philippa. Really good to talk to you. Happy bank holiday to you.